Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Game Over Winnipeg. My name is Lyss, and I am here to cover a fantastic Winnipeg Jets win today. Before we get started, I just need to address my hat for those of you who are watching live or watching this on YouTube. I lost a bet with Peter and Audie over who was going to win the game on Wednesday. I would never wear this by choice. Hopefully the Flames lose tonight and I have the chance to, really soak it in with this beautiful Flames hat that I have from one of my good friends. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about the 2-0 win over the Nashville Predators tonight, and I am super excited to be joined by Eric Young. Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm alive and well. I can't say so much about the Predators' playoff chances. I mean, the reality is they're not supposed to win any of these games. Certainly weren't supposed to win this game. Jets were definitely the better team. Second period forward, looked like a power play basically. But yeah, it was a fun run while it lasted, and we're here to break down the game. And I'm always ready to talk hockey.
Awesome. Well, that sounds great. I know for myself and a lot of other Jets fans, beating Nashville always, these games bring back a lot of memories from 2018 and that amazing series, some of the best hockey I've ever watched in my life. So seeing those jerseys go off the ice after a loss still feels pretty special in my heart. But I like a lot of players in the Preds, and they've been a fun division rival for the last little bit. Before we break things down, Eric, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and why you're here on the show with me today and how you've become a friend of Game Over the past little bit?
Yeah, I'm a professional wrestler by trade. I guess that's kind of how I've gained some notoriety in the world as a professional wrestler. I've worked for TNA Wrestling. I've worked for NXT. I've worked for Raw and SmackDown in the WWE. Worked for Impact Wrestling, and I'm currently kind of in between some kind of big stuff in the works right now that I can't discuss. But that's kind of how a lot of people would know me. I'm a crazy hockey fan. I watch 200 to 300 live games. On television every year. I go to as many live games as possible. I have a subscription to the Hockey News. I live, breathe, eat, sleep, drink, sweat, bleed hockey. It's my favorite sport outside of pro wrestling. People will argue that it's not a sport. I will argue with them all day. But yeah, I've loved hockey my whole life. Played it poorly when I was a kid. Still play it poorly as a rec league player. But yeah, I just love hockey. I worked for The Athletic, doing fantasy hockey coverage. I've worked for Pat Mayo. I've worked for FNSTY, and now I'm currently working for FTN. And me, Chris Meany's show, Dangle Bet Selly, can be seen on Gate Plus Network, the Fantasy Network, or FNSTY Network, FTN Network. It can be seen on YouTube. Anywhere you can see shows, it's out there and available. And just a hockey fanatic, really. I'll watch games all night, every day. Technology allows me to watch them anywhere in the world, any country that I'm in, any time zone that I'm in. So it's definitely a massive, massive passion of mine. And I'm good friends with Steve Tangle, Adam Wild, Jesse Blake, your fearless leaders over at the SDPNY or SDPN network, which I love, and I love the story of it. And this will be my third Game Over appearance. I joked on Twitter earlier that those guys are going to have to start paying me. But I'll talk hockey all day, any day, and I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, that's super, super exciting. And, obviously Preds fan, that's why we got you on today to talk about this one in particular. Yeah. So let's dive right into it and tell me a little bit about what you saw tonight and your general thoughts on the game, either from a Preds perspective or just from the overall perspective of what you saw in this frame.
Yeah, as a Preds fan, I moved to Nashville in 2004, and I fell in love with this team. I do a ton of stuff with the team. I work and appear at a ton of their charity events, play in their golf tournaments poorly. I play in their bowling tournaments poorly. And I have friends with a bunch of the players and a bunch of the people that work there still today. And it's an amazing organization, and they've had an amazing run in building a hockey base, a fan base that it can be rivaled by almost any fan base. Like the Vegas Golden Knights, it's considered, one of the best game experiences. All of that stuff, I think, was taken from and learned from what Nashville was doing here in Tennessee. Obviously not a traditional hockey market, but they've carved out a real niche in the sports community here, and it's full most nights, especially when they're competitive. There was a stat shown on the game. I think the top six for Winnipeg had 3,800 games as NHLers, and the Preds have 755. So a little bit of disparity there, a little bit of difference. The reality is, I mean, between Ekholm being traded, Niederreiter, which you guys I'm sure are enjoying, a player that I've loved since he played in Carolina, Yossi being hurt, Forsberg out, Johansson hurt. They had 9 to 11 players that would normally be playing in Milwaukee at this time of year in the starting lineup tonight, playing important minutes. So the reality is they're not supposed to win any of these games. They shouldn't even be in this position, but it's been a hell of a ride, and the kids are playing their hearts out. First period was pretty even, and then the Jets just took over, and that's the Jets that I think I should be seeing most nights. You know, they've got a ton of speed, good skaters, big bodies, and they were pressuring the Nashville Predators second period, third period, and they're going to do very well if they can play that kind of game against anybody in the NHL.
Yeah, definitely. There were some moments and flashes in that second period and later in the game as well that I thought this team looked really strong, and they looked how I wanted them to look tonight in particular. Obviously, this game is super important, and I feel like people have been hearing me say that since like February, March. You know, they've all been important. We all know it's important.
But it's true when you're at the bottom like that, right?
Absolutely, for sure. And especially when it's against someone else who's in the race just as much as you are. Like you said, the circumstances surrounding their positioning in the wild card are a little bit different, where Jets fans, started this season as the top of the division and they should have stayed up there, and whatnot. Whereas the Nashville Predators were legitimate sellers at the deadline. And so it's a little bit different, but like you said, the kids are playing their heart out. So it's been really fun to watch them and whatnot. But yeah, the Jets team definitely got their act together a little bit in the second, which was really nice. And the power play looked a little bit stronger. I thought they had some really good puck movement at 5-on-5. But you mentioned a player earlier, and I wanted to sort of really start off by talking about Nino Niederreiter in particular. So it's really nice to have someone who is a Preds fan, longtime Preds fan, on the show to talk about that player, because anytime you bring in someone at the deadline from a market that you are less familiar with, obviously when it's within division, you know them relatively well, but you like hearing what other fans have to say about that player and what they saw when they were with their team. So obviously Niederreiter wasn't with the Preds for a super long time, but what are your thoughts on that player, anything that you might have seen from him tonight, and what your thoughts were at the deadline when the Jets traded for him?
Yeah, I mean, to me, tonight was more of the same. A guy that can really skate. I don't think I fully understand how big he was until he got here, and I could compare him to players that I watch every week. Like I said, like I'll watch 200 to 300 games on TV a year, which doesn't leave a lot of time for sleep, but that's okay. He's a really good player, and was a really good player in Carolina. And exactly the kind of player that you want going into a playoff run. Can play in your top six, is good in every situation, has a big body, can skate well, can shoot well, has enough skill to play in the top six. But what I think the Jets are going to enjoy most is the physical nature of his game, and he can play mean, and that's important at this time of year. Tonight was basically a playoff game, and he was noticeable anytime he was on the ice, like he was here in Nashville too. I didn't want to see him go, and I think it looked like he enjoyed the time here, was a good player for them. But the reality is they made all the right moves, trying to sell some players. They were never really in a position to make the playoffs, somehow rattled off a bunch of wins with all these kids up from Milwaukee, and put themselves in a fighting position basically until tonight. And I think mathematically, I was promised there would be no math today, and I'm terrible at math, but I think mathematically they're still in it. And I think especially if Calgary loses tonight. So we're both cheering for Calgary to lose.
Oh, definitely. Definitely will be cheering for those guys to lose. But that's nice to hear, and I definitely agree with the whole concept of the mutual fit as well, because like you said, it wasn't the position they were in to keep all of their players and whatnot, and it was a great fit for the Jets, and I think they always like bringing in guys who have a little bit of extra term as well. They're a big fan of that, whether it's an expiring person that they can sign to an extension, or they bring in a player with an extra year or two. It's been a great fit. I really like him on the Jets. He's found a spot right now, at least with the way they're deploying the lines, on the third line with Adam Lowry and Mason Appleton. which is an interesting fit, and I didn't like it at first. But I like the way that the Winnipeg Jets top six was playing tonight for the most part, and that actually brings me to our ad read that I want to share. So get in on the action and make your bet with Sports Interaction. Every hit, every shot, every goal from all your favorite teams and players, like what we saw from Nikolai Ehlers tonight. There's always lots that you can bet on, especially with a player like that, getting on the scoreboard in some capacity. So with competitive odds, the best in live and play, and more ways than ever to get into the game, like Minute Madness, the exclusive game that we have at Sports Interaction with so many opportunities to win by the minute. Download the app in Ontario using the QR code that you can see at the bottom of my screen, or head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to get started. 19 plus, please play responsibly. So with the Winnipeg Jets top 9 right now, they're operating with Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, and Pierre-Luc Dubois as their top line, which I will talk about in a little bit, of course. But I want to talk a little bit about Nikolai Ehlers on the power play tonight and also on their second line. So did you have any thoughts on that player tonight, what you saw from him, and, just kind of the conversations that have been surrounding him across the league in the last little bit?
Yeah, I'm in lockstep with almost everybody, and especially including Winnipeg fans. I don't understand why he's not playing more. I get that there's 12 players that have to play and on offense for the forwards, but the reality is Ehlers is, probably their best skater outside of Kyle Connor. Me and Chris Meany, we've loved Kyle Connor for years. We coin our show a Kyle Connor show. I'm the crazy guy that bets on goal scoring. And anytime he plays, I bet on him to score. Hasn't rewarded me this year as much as he did last year. But he's just such an electric skater. Ehlers got the puck, went behind the net during one of the power plays and was really winding it up, skating through the middle of the ice. It looked like everybody else was skating in mud compared to him. He's just, for people that have worn ice skates and know how difficult it is for a player to move that effortlessly and at that speed with world-class skaters around him, like it just jumps off the screen to me, his skating ability, offensive touch. He's tenacious, a really good forechecker. And I believe Ehlers should be used more. The reality is players like Blake Wheeler, who's been a very good player for years. He hasn't scored in, I don't know how long. You're closer to the team, but I know it's been a long time since Blake Wheeler scored. And he is not the player he used to be. And I feel that Ehlers should be playing up and be playing more minutes and taking away from some of the older players. Winnipeg's going to have a lot of problems coming up with the salary cap and some of these long-term contracts of players that are 30 plus. It's going to be difficult for them, and everybody's going to run into salary cap stuff eventually. The Winnipeg Jets have been competitive for, as long as I can remember them since they showed back up in Winnipeg, they've been a very competitive team. So they're going to hit that wall, and hopefully they get a good, long, deep run. Hellebuyck looked really good tonight at the start of the year. Like you were saying, like they're in first place. They're leading the Central Division. At one point, I believe they were leading the Western Conference. And you're like, okay, yeah, the Jets are back. And it fell apart. And I don't know. I've watched tons of Jets this year, and I don't know what it is. But a big thing for me is Nikolai Ehlers needs to be playing close to 20 minutes a night.
Absolutely agreed. And this is why I got you on the show. This is fantastic, and I completely agree. But it's interesting that you say that you're a massive Kyle Connor fan. So he's been playing up in a very interesting line as of late, with two centers, with Mark Scheifele being moved to the right wing and playing with those guys. What did you think of that line tonight? For myself, I thought they were buzzing out there.
They were definitely, and I think as a person who I play center in rec league, and like I'm not comparing it, but I'm just saying that's where I feel most comfortable when I'm playing rec league, because I can skate pretty well still at my age, and I'm often the most fittest on the ice because of my other occupation, so I don't get tired like some of the other players do. And I think Scheifele, a lot of like we saw in Toronto tonight, them moving John Tavares. John Tavares has played center his entire life, right? All the way from junior hockey, from grade school, all the way through the OHL, and every game as an Islander and every game as a Toronto Maple Leaf, he's played center. But moving him to wing and having Kyle O'Reilly play center, it frees him up and relieves some of the pressure on Tavares. And I think because of his skating, he's more he's more effective as a winger. And that might be what's happening with Scheifele there too. I love that line. Kyle Connor is one of my favorite players to watch in the NHL. It's just an electric skater. I mean, an unbelievable shot and release, like world class, like, top 10 probably in the league. Every time the puck is on his stick, like tonight, every time he had the puck on his stick in the offensive zone, I'm holding my breath. So I was winded.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I think you made a good point about Mark Scheifele and the movement to the wing, because I think, especially the way that the Winnipeg Jets play too, I find that there's a lot of pressure on that center to have a little bit more of a defensive conscience. With some teams, especially when they play some really straight up trap defense, they have a lot of guys coming up the walls. Sometimes their wingers have to do a pretty good job of, blocking out those guys. But Mark Scheifele is a very defensively deficient player, which doesn't always work the best with the way the Winnipeg Jets play. So I like the move as of late. It'll be interesting to see if that's a fit they want to keep going into the playoffs, if that were to be the direction this team goes, of course, pending a Vancouver Canucks win tonight and a couple of other outcomes to come this week. But it's really interesting to put him there, and I'm a big fan of moving guys around if the team isn't working, and the team definitely wasn't working. They've been a lot better since they put those guys together. So hopefully they can keep it up and also keep moving those pucks on the power play, because the power play looked a lot better to me tonight, and I think it's all because of Nikolai Ehlers being up there and feeding those pucks. That one pass that he had tonight for that one goal was just so beautiful to Neil Pionk. Just, fantastic stuff. So good to see all that. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about the Nashville Predators, though, because this is a team that, like you said, obviously we've all had all the money puck pulled up of the playoff odds. We know what we need from this team in order for the Jets to make the playoffs and all that good stuff. But this year aside, this is a team and a core that we're likely going to be seeing a little bit more of as we go up. You've been talking about how a lot of these players should be on Milwaukee right now, and a lot of them, it's not because they're washed fourth liners, it's because they're young, up-and-coming guys. So tell me a little bit about some of the young players that we saw out there tonight. Obviously, the Winnipeg native, Cody Glass, is someone that a lot of Jets fans are familiar with. Luke Evangelista, I thought, was a standout tonight. He's very fun to watch as well. So a couple of young players like that. Give me the rundown on some of those guys that we can expect to see within the Central Division for a bit longer.
Yeah, it's cool to watch Cody Glass, him coming over from Vegas, obviously high draft pedigree, a player that the Vegas Golden Knights took very early in the draft. And it just kind of never transpired there, never was able to put it together. And I think it has everything to do with confidence. And I feel the NHL, like, there's not a player that hasn't dominated some level of hockey in their life. And when they come to the NHL, all of a sudden they're surrounded by players that have dominated at every level, and everyone can skate and everyone can shoot. And, it's everyone knows exactly where to be and exactly what to do. And it really it's about confidence and being put in a position that he's used to, like playing in the top six. Obviously he's done that for Nashville for most of the year. Having injuries and stuff like that, Cody Glass being thrust into the kind of the top center, top power play center, has given him a ton of opportunity. And I think it's allowing him to see that he can play at the highest level. And that kind of confidence and that kind of experience is going to be great for the Predators going forward. And a player that I also love to talk to, Evangelista, is slick. Reminds me of Patrick Kane, where I'm not saying he's the same kind of player. Patrick Kane is a first ballot Hall of Famer. There's no doubt about it. But Evangelista is small. He's not a big player, but people have trouble containing him and hitting him. And I can remember Nashville playing Chicago, and everyone would be screaming and saying, just hit him. Well, he can't. Like, he's too smart of a player. He's too good of a player. And Evangelista reminds me of him. Tricky hands, really slick with the puck. Great vision, and just this ability to slide and move out of the way and avoid contact. And that's important for a player his size. But the player that I love the most right now, the young player, is Tommy Novak. If you go back and you watch our shows from earlier in the year from the FTN network, I pitched a fit because I couldn't believe that he didn't make the starting roster. He was so good last year in a third and fourth line role. He's one of those players that is heads up, slick with the puck. What I think sets him apart is his hockey IQ and his vision. He just sees things, and him and Yossi playing on the power play, kind of pitching it back and forth is beautiful to see. They re-signed him, I think, for 2 years at $850, and it could be one of the best value contracts next year and the year beyond, because he's an unbelievable player.
That's awesome. A lot of people who are regular here know that I'm a huge fan of young players just in general, and I think a lot of people are. They're so exciting because they have so much to prove out there, and they're also they're unknown quantities, right? So you never really know what you're going to get early on. You're like, oh, that was awesome. Was it a fluke, or is that going to be a pattern that's going to develop? So that's super exciting. Like from a hockey fan perspective, from a Jets fan perspective, knowing that you have all this up and coming talent, not what I want to be hearing, but it is what it is.
It's fun. It's a fun time to be a Preds fan. It's completely different, right? They've been so competitive for the last 3 or 4 years, and wanting veteran players and players that they can trust, and them making the move of shipping some players away, which you hate to see. Guys like, you're welcome, Edmonton. Like, I mean,
No kidding.
Ekholm is, I mean, he's a top 20 defenseman, I think, in the league. He's lived here in Roman Josi, who I believe is a top 3 defenseman in the league. He's lived in his shadow, but he's a good puck mover and a good skater in his own right. And people in Edmonton now and Canada in general are finding out that Ekholm is an unbelievable player. Obviously, Niederreiter was not here long, but like you said, was a very effective player. It was tough to see those guys go. But I think that management, David Poyle and Barry Trotz, did the right thing 100%. It was time to do it, and they've set themselves up to be really good very quickly again here. So, and these young guys are getting a ton of experience playing at the end of the year in games that really matter. So it's exciting time to be a Predators fan for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, all that young talent and that, saying the ability to be very good again very soon. We all know that the big elephant in the room when it comes to how good is a team really going to be is always the goaltending. It's always a question mark for a lot of teams, but both you and myself, we're a little bit luckier than some others with having some good goaltending. You mentioned Connor Hellebuck was good tonight, of course, color me shocked, right? But I thought UC Saros had a good game as well, and it's the type of thing where I'm sure you're the same way as I am, where someone who's watching a different team, when you're playing against the Preds, they'll come to you and they're like, oh man, Saros is so good tonight, and you're like, okay, he looked like he does every night. Like you said, you're spoiled. You get to watch this guy play every single day. But I thought he looked fantastic tonight. He had so much control. That one Mark Scheifele goal, there were 6 guys in front of him, and he almost had it too. He did have it. It was just a nice bounce that ended up working out over top of the glove and whatnot. But tell me a little bit about what you saw from UC Saros in particular tonight, and just a little bit about that player as well.
I mean, he's everything for the Predators. They're not even close to this without him. Like, he's facing 30 to 35, sometimes 40 shots a game. And he's been unbelievable. And I'm man enough to admit that I was wrong about him when Pecorino was the starter here and they had Saros and people believed that Saros could take over. I was very, very hesitant. I was almost vocal about him not being able to be a full-time starter because of his size. I'm not a super tall guy, but he's shorter than me. And to play in the NHL, it to me, I just kept saying, and I was wrong. I kept saying it just comes down to geometry. And the reality is if he's down in his butterfly, the top part of the net is open, and you can be as fast as you want and have as good a reflexes as you want. The majority of these guys in the league can shoot the puck 80 to 90 miles an hour, on every single shot. So I was worried that his small stature was going to hold him back. And I'm very happy to say that he's made me look like an idiot. He's all world. I think if the Preds win 10 or 15 more games, that he probably very easily could threaten to win the Vezina Trophy. Obviously, they're very unlikely to make it into the playoffs. I think he'll get some votes. But the reality is he's a top 5 goalie in the league. And in Nashville, we've been spoiled. We went from, guys like Thomas Vokoun, Chris Mason, Dan Ellis when he was playing unbelievable, to right to Pecorino, right to UC Saros. And then after him, they got Askarov bench pressing the net in the Milwaukee Admirals minor league right now. And just been absolutely spoiled at the goaltending position here in Nashville.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't even imagine going from Pecorino to Saros is crazy. And like you said, Askarov coming up. Yeah, I've seen a couple of those highlights of him. He seems like a bugger. Like I remember watching him in the World Juniors and stuff too, and it was always an exciting time. Some goaltenders are very stoic and he doesn't stand around. That guy, he's moving around. He's having a good time out there. So definitely a fun player and a fun team to watch. Like you said, good time to be a Preds fan. But I want to talk about a couple things that I'm seeing in the chat here. So David here mentions that he sees the Preds next season being more likely to bounce back than someone like the Canucks, even though they were both sellers at this deadline as opposed to buyers. And obviously we've talked a little bit about how we desperately need that Canucks win tonight, hopefully in regulation, but I'll take any form of win that I can get from them. But do you see any similarities between those teams, and any, do you see a higher likelihood for the Preds to be more of a stronger team next year as opposed to someone like the Canucks?
Yeah, they get healthy. They get, Matt Duchene back. They get Ryan Johansson back. They get Philip Forsberg, Roman Josi, who is the best player on this team. It's, not arguable in any way, shape, or form. You already have a very solid start to your top six. Then you get guys like Evangelista. You've got Tommy Novak, Kiefer Sherwood, who's had an unbelievable season. A bunch of these young players that are making, not league minimum, but are definitely below $1 million, and that's in a salary cap world. You need players like that can contribute and play to keep the salary cap low. So I think they have, they've got a ton of draft picks this draft, which is going to take place here in Nashville, which I'm pretty excited about. I'm going to try to be around and go to it as much as possible. Stick my head down there. A bunch of people will be in town that I know, and I'd like to see them. But the Canucks, they do some puzzling things. The Hronek trade at the trade deadline was very bizarre to me. Is a good player, but he's almost 30 years old. He's going to start to decline. And that's not the kind of player they need. The Kuzmenko signing, I think that is a good one, and they need a win as far as a front office goes. They need a win, and it looks like the Kuzmenko one is good. The JT Miller, choosing him over Horvat, I will never understand. He's a good offensive player, but just defensively can be a real liability. And I think that the Canucks have many more right decisions to make to put them in a position to be competitive. I think, again, it comes down to goaltending, like you were saying earlier, is Pocket being there. They've gotten better, obviously. And since the return of Demko, they've been a very, very competitive team. So I think it's very up in the air. I think the Preds have, a couple years to be very, very good, but I think that the turnaround could happen very quickly. This was like a dismantling, right? Like they would have got a win of more players, I believe, if they could have, but they got an absolute king's ransom for Tanner Jeannot, who is one of my favorite players. It was sad to see him go. But for what they got from Tampa Bay, like, who would say no to that? Nobody.
No kidding.
So Barry Trott's never been a GM. We're going to find out how well he does, but he's in a very enviable position. I would imagine most GMs would look at this team and how it's made right now and the position that they're in with how much many draft picks they have and the salary cap space they have, and would be very excited to move forward with a team like that. So they're in a very good position moving forward. Obviously, I never thought it would be this close. I thought that they would basically just get ran over for the rest of the year after the trade deadline, but that's not what's happened. And it's been exciting, and it's cool seeing these young players getting to play in a ton of meaningful games.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am running out of time on my call here with Eric. So before we wrap things up, my last kind of general thought-provoking question for you here is basically just, obviously we know that this playoff race is tight and these three teams are going to be button heads right until the end to try and figure this out. But as an intuitive hockey fan who is familiar with the league but probably doesn't scrutinize the Winnipeg Jets as much as someone like myself or any of our listeners do, what did you see from the Jets tonight that you think is going to be really important for them to maintain as a competitive advantage going forward? Or on the other hand, an area of weakness that you think is going to be really important for them to kind of clean up and fix up if they want to see any success moving forward?
I think the pressure, right? The reality is the pressure for the Preds and any team, that kind of skating and size that they have is rare. Like there's teams that can pressure and can skate, but they don't have the size as well. And Ehlers is big. Dubois is a massive hockey player. Scheifele's a big hockey player. Wheeler's a big hockey player. Lowry's a giant. Appleton's a giant. Like, these are all big guys, and they can all skate. So when they're playing how they played tonight, with that, just the pressure, in deep, having the defenseman having to turn and go back and retrieve pucks and wing it around the wall, and the wingers cutting it off, like, that's one, it's exhausting to play against. It's irritating to play against, especially as a defenseman and as a winger. Like you're getting crashed into and banged into every time the puck goes into your end. And then by the time you gather the puck and are able to get it out of your zone, you're so tired from chasing them around. You have to dump it in and go change. And that's what we saw over and over and over and over and over and over in the second and third period tonight. And if they play like that, there's nobody they can't beat. As you know, any good hockey fan knows, it comes down to goaltending. And Hellebuck has had a very, very good year. I would say that none of the problems that they've had in the second half of the season have anything to do with Connor Hellebuck.
Oh, God.
He's an elite goaltender, always has been. And if you have that, you can beat anybody in the playoffs.
Absolutely. That's, again, the thing, like you said, the playoffs are so bizarre. So a goaltender can win or lose you a series any day of the week. It's a coin flip a lot of the time, and a goalie like Connor Hellebuck can steal a series for any team, even if they're as deeply flawed as the Winnipeg Jets are. So before I let you go, before we sign off for the evening, for those of you who are listening live, thank you so much for being here. Make sure you leave a like and make sure you subscribe to SDPN before you head out. But I just want to hear some of your wild playoff predictions and what you think is going to happen, maybe particular to the Western Conference, because we all have so many thoughts. That Eastern Conference looks wide open and crazy fun. But what are some of your crazy playoff predictions or some of your hot takes that you think we might see down the stretch?
So I've loved the Los Angeles Kings all year. I like to drink heavily at the start of the year and then make a bunch of long-term future bets for who's going to play for and win the Stanley Cup. I don't advise anybody to do that, but that's what I like to do. And the Los Angeles Kings is a team I put. I'm not a massive, big money gambler, but, like a big bet would be like, $5, $10, $20 if I'm really confident on it. Just do, if you're into betting, just relax, take it easy. You're not going to change your fortunes by betting on hockey because it's madness. But yeah, I love Los Angeles. If they've gotten pretty good goaltending from Korpisalo and Phoenix Copley, I think it's one of the coolest stories of the year. If I'm going to pick any team right now out of the West, it would be Edmonton. I'm not betting against Connor McDavid, and I feel it sounds homerish, but the addition of Matthias Ekholm made this the most complete Edmonton Oilers team that we've seen in 5 years.
No, you're 100%
exactly
right.
Exactly what they needed. I mean, exactly what they needed. And you can see how good they've been since acquiring him. It's not rocket science. He's an unbelievable player and exactly the kind of player they needed. He's big. He can skate. He can move the puck. His first pass is always awesome. He's mean. Like I'm talking mean. Like he's Viking mean, in front of the net. And you need guys like that. Hockey is still a full contact sport. If I'm picking someone to win the Stanley Cup, I'm picking Edmonton to win the Stanley Cup in the West. Obviously the East is littered with, the Boston Bruins, it's insane. Taylor Hall is healthy right now and they don't have enough money to fit him in. So he's just going to wait until the playoffs. You got to fix that, NHL. New Jersey Devils are a great story, ton of speed, ton of skill. Jack Hughes is one of my favorite players to watch. And I've been a Maple Leafs fan my entire life. They don't make it easy. But I've followed the Maple Leafs my whole life. I'm not quite as insane as Steve, but I'm a little more level-headed when it comes to them. But the camel the monkey for them is just making it out of the first round. I believe they do it this year. And a crazy prediction: whoever Boston plays, I've got this weird, sneaky gut feeling that Boston's going to lose in the first round. And how many times have we seen it? The President's Trophy winner get outed in the first round by a team that barely snuck in. So. I'm not going to put any money on it, but I've got a weird gut feeling. Remember I said that.
Interesting. Okay, I'm going to hold you to a lot of these because I feel like you made definitely some good points. I am a massive Leafs and Oilers hater. Like you will pull at me kicking and screaming before I say anything good about either of those teams. But the Edmonton Oilers had one of the best deadlines of any team in the NHL. I was so mad when they brought in Bukestad and Ekholm. I was like, are you joking? Like, I didn't want them to get good, and they got better, and they've been so fantastic ever since. And I fully agree. This is the year the Leafs do it. This is the year they get the monkey off the back, and they make it out of there. This Tampa team isn't as good as they've been in the last couple of years. Still fantastic. Still anything can happen. And I like the Bruins hot take. It's fun. It's spicy, and I feel like the East has a lot of room for some upsets. So Eric, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It's been super fantastic. Thank you for spending your Saturday evening with us. For any of you who are listening, it's been a great time. Before you leave, Eric, where can all of our listeners find you on Twitter or anything else?
Yeah, the Eric Young on Twitter, the Eric Young IG on Instagram, FTN Network, FTN Daily. That's the network I work for. Me and my friend Chris Meany, who lives in the East Coast, do a really cool betting hockey show. We basically just talk hockey, but it's definitely betting centric about, shot props and goal scorers and parlays and things like that. It's called Dango Bet Selly. Anywhere you can find, iTunes or Apple or wherever, podcatcher, anything that you use to download those, you can download that. Like you said, is, if you're watching this stuff and you're enjoying it, just even if you don't watch everyone, subscribe, like it's how it gets seen. It's how it grows. It's how it stays around. If it's something that you enjoy, you got to support it or it disappears. So, but yeah, this was really fun. I will talk hockey all day, every day with anybody. You're a passionate Winnipeg Jets fan. This was really cool. This is my third game over. I'm making.
Oh, and I've lost him. That's the end of our meeting. I knew we were cutting it close, but thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. It's been a ton of fun. Make sure you hit the like button on the way out, and we will see you all next time.
Game over! Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.